tonight's big stories. U.S. President Joe Biden warns China not to attack the Philippines, saying its defense commitment is ironclad. China hits right back and says the U.S. has no right to get involved in the maritime dispute.
The Philippines officially drops its request for Chinese loans to fund key infrastructure, including the proposed first railway system in Mindanao. Transport Secretary Jaime Bautista says China seems to be losing interest anyway.
And we'll speak to Baguio City Mayor Benjamin Magalong about the anti-corruption movement that he started, which dozens of mayors have now joined.
Welcome to the show. I'm Regina Lay.
I'm Gretchen Hall.
And I'm Danny Laurel.
U.S. President Joe Biden made headlines around the world today after he warned China not to attack the Philippines. Speaking alongside Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese at the White House, he said any attack would trigger Washington's Mutual Defense Treaty with Manila.
I want to be very clear. The United States defense commitment to the Philippines is ironclad. The United States defense agreement with the Philippines is ironclad. Any attack on the Filipino aircraft vessels or armed forces will invoke our mutual defense treaty with the Philippines.
This comes after the latest incident at Ayungin Shoal in the West Philippine Sea, which took place just last week. Chinese Coast Guard vessels tried to stop Philippine boats from a routine resupply mission. As in previous encounters, both sides pointed fingers at each other, with Manila calling it dangerous maneuvers by the CCG and Beijing claiming an exaggerated encounter.
Now, in response to Biden, the Chinese Foreign Ministry says that the U.S. is not party to the South China Sea issue and has no right to get involved in the problem between Manila and Beijing. This has been China's position ever since. They've gone so far as to call America a troublemaker for intervening.
Well, here we go again. So, the issue is whether U.S. actually should be involved in this situation. But they did seem to hint on the fact that it was an aggressive threat. So that's already recognizing the fact that at least our side saying that it was a collision, it wasn't accidental, there was an intention here. And to what extent, China is accepting of this is a question, because they're saying you have no right actually to interfere, and they called it undermining our sovereignty by having the U.S. step in.
That's been consistent with their position, actually. They've always said that the Washington has no jurisdiction over this part of the world and therefore should not intervene, right? I think the big question here at this point is what would trigger that
Invoke it.
MDT, the Mutual Defense Treaty, right?
Speaking of the Mutual Defense Treaty, taking a look at Article 5. The treaty was signed, of course, in 1951, and the document cites the armed attack on the metropolitan territory of either parties, island territories, as well as the armed forces and public vessels and aircraft. Is what would constitute that. It's not clear whether supply boats can be considered public vessels or if the recent incident does fall under armed attack in general. Remember as well, we're waiting on the findings of that investigation into the Ayungin Shoal collision, which the PCG had previously said should be out around October 28th. You weren't here the other day, but we asked Commodore Targuela about if this would invoke the Mutual Defense Treaty. He said he did not want to speak on it.
Yes,
I guess
because
it's
very, very sensitive.
Agreed.
Right? Who gets to say this is the incident that will invoke that Mutual Defense Treaty? And I guess that's the president, being the architect of the our foreign affairs strategy, right? But it's not unclear at this point exactly what an attack, what level of an attack would constitute.
And of course, China's been defending themselves, saying that tayo daw yung nag-cut sa kanilang barko. Right?
Some videos do show that.
Or it's also not a resupply mission. There were construction materials that might be provocative. But the question is, did we see in the video whether it's an armed attack? We don't know yet.
I think confusing din because they're in the middle of the sea. There are no lines to tell us who was going straight, who was curving.
And lots of people have weighed in on this. They're kind of just, okay.
No, they're really doing maneuvers.
Diba nasa
maneuvers
likod
talaga.
yung tubig na nasa likod ng barko, diba? That's where you see the direction.
It also depends on which the camera angle, right?
Again,
which perspective we're seeing it from, right? And of course, the significance of today's news was U.S. President actually coming out right to say that the defense treaty is commitment, warning China not to attack the Philippines, that the Washington stands ready to step up and invoke that treaty.
We're glad
if
that
need
part
be,
is clear.
because there's also more geopolitical events coming up, right? We've got Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi in Washington next week, actually, late October. That's from 26 to 28. There's an APEC meeting in San Francisco. That's mid-November. That's 11 to 17. And again, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese visiting China from November 4 to 7. Not clear at this point whether they're going to be talking about maritime and territorial issues, but certainly, we're going to try to cover that as best as we can.
Well, if it is true that Washington has indeed stepped up on its defense commitments to the Philippines, what else can we expect in the coming months? Brian Castillo tells us more. Brian, go ahead.
Gretch, since we're talking about ironclad commitments from the U.S., we visited one of their first line in terms of power projection anywhere in the world. We saw firsthand America's fighter jets as they conducted flight operations straight from the USS Ronald Reagan. This nuclear-powered aircraft carrier is set to make a port visit in Manila soon.
The visit of the Reagan is a symbol of the partnership and the alliance that we have with the Philippines. Visits by an aircraft carrier are not very common, but this is already the second visit by the Ronald Reagan. Our alliance with the Philippines is what enables these sorts of engagements.
Gretch, aside from the flight operations, we also got to tour the USS Ronald Reagan along with other members of the media. And you can easily tell why it's called a super carrier by the sheer size of the vessel. Gretch, the visit of the USS Ronald Reagan is made possible through our Mutual Defense Treaty and Visiting Forces Agreement with the U.S. And while we wait for the carrier to dock, the U.S. has made it a point to acknowledge the Philippines' efforts in exposing incidents in the West Philippine Sea. The U.S. said it will continue to help uphold freedom of navigation in international waters, even if they get branded as a troublemaker by China. Gretch?
All right, thanks for that update, Brian Castillo.
Now, we are not saying that this is directly related to the maritime dispute, but cracks are starting to show in our country's economic relationship with Beijing under the Marcos administration. The Philippines has in fact dropped China as a funding source for at least 3 major railway projects. Now, these are the South Long Haul, Subic-Clark, and the Mindanao Railway projects. Transport Secretary Jaime Bautista confirmed in an interview on Radio 5 that they are now looking for other financing sources for these projects. That's after loan negotiations with Beijing stalled. Bautista noted that it appears as though China is no longer interested in funding the railways anyway. The Finance Department also wrote to the Chinese embassy to make official that it was withdrawing its request for Official Development Assistance, or ODAs, for the Mindanao Railway project. Recall that Beijing was supposed to finance Phase 1 of that railway project, which covered the Tagum-Davao-Digos segment. The letter, signed by Finance Secretary Ben Diokno, made no mention of why the Philippines was withdrawing its loan application. Now, the railway was supposed to start construction in 2019 and at that time had been touted as a signature piece of former President Duterte's Build, Build, Build campaign.
Let's get the details on this whole issue with DOTr Assistant Secretary for Railways Jorjette Aquino, Assistant Secretary. Good evening. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, good evening, Gretchen, Regina, and Danny.
So I wonder if you could begin by giving us more clarity on the 3 railway projects that we've just reported on. In particular, the Mindanao Railway project, Phase 1 of it, which was supposed to cover Tagum-Davao-Digos. Which a few years ago, of course, under former President Duterte was highly, highly anticipated, and now it's come to this where we don't have funding, it's stalled. What happened there?
Yeah, first, the Mindanao Railway project, as you mentioned, is actually from Tagum, Davao, and Digos. It's actually a 100-kilometer railway project. Initially, there were talks with the Chinese government on the financing for the Mindanao Railway project. And just to apprise you, the procedure actually in availing of concessionary loan committed by China to support Philippine projects posits that the former must provide a list of at least 3 Chinese contractors, which shall be subjected to DOTR's procurement processes. Now, in a series of letters way back in 2021, 2022, from the DOTR to the Chinese embassy, the DOTR requested the submission actually of a short list of design and build contractors for the Mindanao Railway Project Phase 1. Now, this did not materialize, and the request for loan financing lapsed in validity, which, as a consequence, was deemed automatically withdrawn way back in end of May 2022. And also in accordance with the ultimatum issued by the former Secretary of Finance to the China Exim Bank. Now, to formally express that it is no longer inclined, or we are no longer inclined to pursue the China ODA funding for the MRT Phase 1, the Department of Finance actually sent a letter to the Chinese embassy last September of this year.
Has there been no response at all from the Chinese side? As you pointed out,
We
this has
have not
been...
received. We are not sure if the Department of Finance actually has received a reply from the Chinese embassy on this.
No, I don't mean just the DOF's letter. I mean, in the previous 4-5 years.
We have not received any reply from the Chinese embassy on this.
None at all, not just the embassy, but from Beijing itself.
Yes, from the Chinese government.
Okay. ASEC, is this because of, I don't know, perhaps the projects also stalled because of the COVID-19 pandemic? You also have the economic situation in China, not very good at the moment. Or is this because of the project viability in terms of it's a project that does not necessarily require funding because it might actually not happen at the moment?
Well, we cannot just assume, right, as to the reason behind the non-response from the Chinese government. But this project, the Mindanao Railway Project, has been approved by NEDA. This has been studied. In fact, it has been in the plan of the previous administration, and it is still in this administration's plan.
Okay, what is the progress now of the 3 projects, and do we already have alternative sources of funding?
Well, right now, for the South Long Haul, the Subic-Clark Railway projects, we are continuously doing land acquisition, continuing the right-of-way. Also, we are continuously paying for affected landowners. And also, we are continuously developing the resettlement sites, which are actually underway.
Any interest from anyone at all to come in to fund these projects?
Well, we are looking into other funding sources on this, but currently there's no specific institution or financing organization that has provided interest.
Can you say, ASEC, that this is contingent on this funding from China, and at the moment without a response from China, this project might simply not push through?
We cannot say that because actually, as I mentioned, there may be a considerable setback in the implementation of these projects. But as I mentioned earlier, the Department of Transportation is continuing its right-of-way and site acquisition activities for the Mindanao Railway Project, the South Long Haul, and the Subic-Clark Railway. And we are also continuously releasing payments for affected landowners. And acquisition and development of resettlement sites are also underway.
Right. What do you think has led to the disinterest of Beijing in funding this? Would you point to the rising tensions in the West Philippine Sea, or would you point to the shift in, foreign diplomatic policy of this Marcos administration?
Well, we may not be able to assume the motivations of the Chinese government regarding the waning of its interest in infrastructure projects or infrastructure financing in the Philippines. But it would be good to note that the discussions with the Chinese government regarding the financing for the Mindanao Railway project started in late 2016, which this was well into the period of the maritime disaccord between China and the Philippines.
And then, Asek, I wonder if you could confirm for us, in the pipeline right now, at least under your jurisdiction, railways, are there any China funded or proposed China funding for any of the projects coming up?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, just on the pipeline initially is the South Long Haul project, which is from Calamba to Albay, and Subic-Clark Railway project, and this Mindanao Railway project.
No, I mean, out of all these projects, are there any that you're planning to go to China for still, or there are no more China
so
funded
far
projects?
none, as of now, yeah.
What about the rest of the 197 flagships? Is this particular to the transport project and the railways, or have other projects also been dropped by Chinese funding?
Well, so far for the Department of Transportation, these are the only projects that are supposed to be funded by the Chinese government. I cannot say for the other agencies or the other departments under the national government.
Okay, fair enough. We're gonna have to leave that there for now. We thank you so much for your updates and insights. That was DOTr Assistant Secretary for Railways, Jorjette Aquino. Another mass shooting in the United States claimed the lives of at least 16 people. The suspect, as of this time, is still being hunted down by authorities. Here's that report.
In this video, people can be seen running for their lives in Lewiston, Maine after an attack by an active shooter in the area. Shortly after, the police and ambulances arrived. Official figures have not yet been released by authorities. But according to local news reports, 16 to 22 individuals are reported dead in consecutive mass shootings, with 50 to 60 others reported injured. In the photos released by the Lewiston police, the suspect can be seen wearing a hoodie jacket and carrying a rifle. This is what the suspect used when he opened fire at a bowling alley and at a bar and grill restaurant. The mass shootings occurred around 6 o'clock in the evening, October 25. Authorities also released a picture of the vehicle used by the suspect. The motive of the gunman has yet to be determined as the manhunt continues. Maine police have also released a close-up shot of the individual considered a person of interest in the crime. He was identified as Robert Card.
We have literally hundreds of police officers working around the state of Maine to investigate this case, to locate Mr. Card, who again is a person of interest and a person of interest only.
At the moment, Card is not yet considered a suspect.
I'm not listing him as a suspect at this point, and we're not prepared to go into his background or anything else that we may be aware of.
The hospital where the victims of the mass shooting were taken is now under high security. The Foreign Affairs Department as well as the Philippine Embassy in America have yet to issue any notice regarding whether there are Filipinos affected by the tragedy. For News 5, Maricel Halili, We Are One News.
So tragic, another mass shooting in the U.S.
Which seems to be, I wouldn't say normal, but something that is regularly reported on.
Happening at a regular occurrence, which is really so scary.
They have identified the gunman as Robert R. Card, 40, and who had been reportedly committed to a mental health facility over the summer. He is a person of interest in the case. And they posted photographs on Facebook of a bearded man in a brown hoodie and jeans at one of the crime scenes holding what appeared to be a semi-automatic rifle in the firing position. He had been trained as a firearms instructor at the U.S. Army Reserve Training Facility in Maine.
It's strange that they have not called him a suspect as of now, right?
Like a person of
interest,
hunting him down,
right?
Yeah.
Right, person of interest.
So at what point actually would you say? I mean, he's in the video.
But we should point out that Maine is one of the states that lacks several major types of gun safety laws, including assault weapons regulation, universal background checks, red flag laws that allow law enforcement to temporarily disarm people that are legally deemed dangerous, and so on and so forth. And again, this is going to trigger another whole debate around gun
laws.
control in the U.S., but not clear at this point
While-
again
while
whether it's
the
going to amount to
war
anything.
is happening in
Exactly.
Israel, and Hamas, and Ukraine, and Russia.
And then this, which actually doesn't even have a clear motive,
Yeah,
right?
at
As
this point,
many other
yeah.
shootings
Yeah.
in the U.S.
We do gotta prevent that here, especially with the upcoming Barangay Nesque elections. Speaking of, why is Bangued Abra such a hotspot for election-related incidents? So we'll get a live report from there on the preps for the Barangay Nesque elections this coming Monday when we return. Welcome back. You're still watching the big story here on One News. Abra is dealing with a mass withdrawal of candidacies for the Barangay and Sangguniang Kabataan elections amid rising political tensions in the province. But Comelec says it has no plans to place Abra under its control. Let's check in on the situation on the ground, find out what is happening with Elaine Fulgencio, who is joining us live from Bangued Abra. Good evening, Elaine. Elaine, what?
Hi, good evening.
Elaine, what steps are authorities taking to secure the remaining days of the campaign and the upcoming elections?
The PNP, COMELEC, and AFP conducted a joint provincial security command conference earlier today in preparation for the forthcoming Barangay and Sangguniang Kabataan elections, wherein they mentioned about the additional PNP forces who will be deployed in areas of concern here in the province of Abra. Especially in the municipality of Bucay, wherein one barangay kagawad has been shot last week. And with regard to the alleged kidnapping or threats or intimidation, PNP says that they did not have received any formal complaints yet about the kidnapping incident or intimidation in Bucay.
Right, just how high are political tensions there? We're kind of confused kasi hindi pa siya under COMELEC control. Pero ang dami nag-withdraw, 250 have withdrawn their candidacies. Is it just because of they have relatives who ran for office? Can you tell us, give us a clear point of view on what is happening?
The provincial election officer of Abra says there's a possibility of declaring Abra province under COMELEC control, but Commission on Elections has no plans yet to put Abra province under its control now that it is already contained. Now, as of today, a total of 48 barangays were put under orange and yellow category, or the areas of concern. Barangays in yellow category are those that have a history of election-related violence, while under the orange category have serious armed threats or presence of private armed groups.
Teka lang, Elaine, you also mentioned there was a mass withdrawal of candidates, no? Also reports of teachers backing out of volunteering for the elections. How many candidates have actually withdrawn, do you know, at this point?
In a press conference earlier today, the election supervisor of Abra says a total of 267 candidates have already withdrawn their candidacy. And some of their reasons were personal reasons. And allegedly, there were cases of threats or intimidation. But the provincial election supervisor of Abra and the PNP says there have been no formal complaints filed to the Commission of Elections nor to the Philippine National Police.
More on those reports of the teachers backing out of volunteering. Can you tell us more about that and if that will affect in any way, the output of the elections?
The election supervisor of Abra confirmed that around 30 teachers have withdrawn from serving to the Barangay and Sangguniang Kabataan elections. But the Philippine National Police also said that they have augmented 300 police forces, wherein 58 of them will be serving as electoral board members because of some teachers who will not be serving for the Barangay and SK elections. And the PNP also assured that those areas will be under the areas of concern will be their security will be heightened. There will be a lot of PNP forces who will be roaming around the polling precincts to ensure the safety and the security of the voters, especially as the teachers who will be serving for the elections.
All right, thank you so much for all of those updates and for joining us tonight. Elaine Fulgencio, mag-ingat ka dyan. Reporting from Benguet Abra.
Meanwhile, a total of 300 police officers will be deployed to Cotabato City in preparation for the BSKE. This is also due to the October 24 shooting in which 2 village councilor candidates and a local resident were killed. Let's get an update on that situation from Mon Gualvez, who is live for us there right now. Mon, let's start with the security over there in Cotabato. What's the situation?
Marine tanks and a lot of police mobiles have seen or would greet anyone who comes here in Cotabato City, particularly in Barangay Rosary Heights 12, where 3 got killed and 3 are wounded in a shooting incident Monday night. Remember, the 12 have been arrested due to that incident, and the paraffin tests done to them yielded negative results for all of the 12 accused. But still, police said that these are not yet conclusive, and so they will conduct another set of investigation on the matter. Meanwhile, with the shooting incident that transpired, many residents have already left their houses and stayed with their relatives in the other barangays or nearby towns due to the fear that they might get harmed due to the political rivalry that is happening in the area.
Okay. Have you spoken to the Cotabato Police about the incident? What did they have to say about you spoke about the rivalry?
Gretchen, well, actually, aside from the continuous investigation on the incident, Cotabato City Police also clarified that the shooting is an isolated case or incident and appealed to the public not to liken the situation into a war or a chaos. And the reason that they are actually beefing up the security in the area is because of the upcoming elections, as well as they would not like a repeat of what happened last Monday night.
Mon, we know you've also been covering Lanao del Sur, no? Where there are also reports of election-related violence. I wonder if you could tell us what's happening over there.
Well, there are actually 2 incidents of election-related violence we've monitored in Lanao del Sur. One is in Barangay Sigayan, in the town of Kapatagan, where candidate Kamar Bilao Bansil was gunned by men riding in a multi-cab van, in which Included the husband of the current chieftain in that barangay. Bansil died of not less than 7 gunshot wounds, and his wife and child survived but were still in the hospital. The suspects, sadly, are still at large. The second incident is in Barangay Datu sa Dansalan, Marawi City, where a chairwoman and her daughter, an aspiring chairwoman, got killed in an ambush. Regina.
Any updates on the Peace and Order Council meeting, Mon?
Well, in the recent concluded Peace and Order Council meeting here in Cotabato City, both the PNP and the AFP affirmed that they are in control of everything in the area. There is no threat whatsoever that they have received, and so there is no need to impose a curfew for the general public. The only curfew they have at the moment is for the minors, starting from 10 p.m. until 4 in the morning.
All right, take care there over in Cotabato City. Thank you for those updates, Mon Gualvez.
In other news, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas has done it again, an off-cycle rate hike, The Monetary Board met today and decided to raise the key rate by 25 basis points to 6.5% in an effort to combat rising inflation. Rates on the overnight deposit and lending facilities were also hiked by 25 basis points to 6% and 7% respectively. The last time the BSP implemented such an off-cycle rate hike was on July 14, 2022, when they were compelled to make a significant 75 basis point increase because the peso depreciated to record low levels. Recall that inflation jumped 6.1% in September as food and transport costs rose much faster than expected.
We're going to pause for another quick one, but right after that, Mayors for Good Governance. That's the movement started by Baguio City Mayor Benjamin Magalong, to which more than 100 mayors have signed up. We'll get an update on this from the mayor himself just after this. back. You're still watching the big story here on One News. Several local chief executives have banded together in the name of anti-corruption. Over 100 Philippine mayors led by Baguio City Mayor Benji Magalong signed a manifesto last August to push for good governance. As we know, corruption in government has been one of the top concerns of ordinary Filipinos, according to recent surveys. The Philippines also continues to rank low in global indices tracking government response to corruption. Well, here to talk about their movement is Baguio City Mayor Benjamin Magalong. Good evening, Mayor. Thanks for joining us again on the big story.
Po.
Good evening, Gretchen, Regina, and Danny. Good evening sa ating mga viewers.
First off, Mayor, let's start with an update. How big is your movement now? How many members do you have?
Right now, we have about 158 mayors who have signed on for good governance advocacy, and we're just currently scratching the surface. We have about 1,600 mayors. That represents about only 10%.
So you're going door to door, you're campaigning, you're lobbying for more people, for more mayors to sign on. Is that what you're doing right now?
Yeah, we're doing our own efforts. At the same time, we're doing our best to form a sectoral movements. Kasi ang pan namin is Mayors for Good Governance is just a sector. And then what we're doing is we're also convincing other sectors, business sector, the doctors, professionals, farmers, fishermen, transportation sectors to form their own good governance movement. And hopefully, once we create that critical mass, we'll be able to come up with probably an overarching movement, and we might call it just a concept, a F4GG, or Filipinos for Good Governance.
Mayor,
now that we have that critical mass, yes.
Mayor, how do you know who to approach to
Kailangan
have
perfectly
joined
clean
your movement?
record.
Meron bang background check? O paano kayo nagre-recruit?
Good question. Good question. In fact, we're getting also a lot of feedbacks coming from other citizens that bakit ito tinanggap mo? Bakit tinanggap nyo? Ang presumption natin dyan is, there's a lot of good things about people. Yan ang presumption namin dyan eh. People change. And we just can't simply turn them away. But now, we're working on a filtering process na rin para at least hindi kami maging deodorant lang.
All right.
So, sinong ayaw? Who doesn't want to sign on? Tell us.
Marami. Hindi ko na siguro babanggit.
Why not?
Maraming hesitant.
What are the reasons?
For some reason, probably they're not comfortable, giving up their special perks and privileges, or they're not yet sold out, probably with the concept of good governance, or probably a lot of them are not yet aware that there's this good governance movement.
Marami sa NCR, Mayor.
We have one is Mayor Joy Belmonte, who joined
yung mga hindi
Yung mga
sumali.
Mayor Joy, Mayor Vico, Mayor Rufy already signed up. Mayor Abby signed on.
Mayor, what's the immediate thing that these mayors need to do once they sign up? Are they supposed to become transparent? Are they supposed to make reports? Issue statements to assure people about their good governance? What's the level of commitment here?
Well, they have their own advocacy drive, and at the same time, us mayors to good governance, what we did was we have our own secretariat. And last September, October 2 to 4, it was a 3-day virtual workshop. Tapos October 24, we had a face-to-face workshop. Last week, we have another meeting with the members of the conveners made up of Mayor Joy, Mayor Vico, Mayor Parsi, Mayor Romel Hatawan, Mayor City, and Mayor Ipiao Remolio of Dumaguete. So nag-meeting kami consistently and regularly para at least ma-update. And now we're working on having partnership programs with big associations and people from the business sector, like Makati Business Club, yung Management Association of the Philippines, League of Corporate Foundations, yung ISA, Institute for Solidarity of Asia. So a lot, pharmaceutical companies, Rotary clubs, they're doing their best to get in touch with us and to come up with a collaborative partnership.
Mayor, the fight against corruption is a slogan that has been bannered time and time again through different elections by different politicians under, the different campaigns. Tell me, why should I believe that this movement will work? What is different with it?
Well, we're gaining traction. That's the big difference. And besides, probably as a lot of our mayors now have that moral ascendancy to lead the campaign. Second is we're aggressive, we're persistent, and we're gaining, as I've said, we're gaining traction, and we're getting a lot of attention from big business groups and associations. We're getting a lot of support from CSOs, civil society organizations. So I believe we'll be able to, sustain this effort.
Well, traction in terms of support, verbal support, but how about pragmatic applications?
Well, that would be a big issue now because there are also certain ethical dilemmas that we have to, face based on the realities in the field. For example, look at what happened to Governor Grace Madacan na talagang good governor siya pero natalo pa rin siya. Katulad ni former Governor Amo, natalo pa rin siya, good governor sila. So there are certain dilemmas that we have to face. Like for example, paano kung ang katapat mo talagang mapera siya, which is happening basically, Sabi ko nga, corruption is pervasive. Corruption is now a norm rather than an exception. So these are the things that we need really to face. So we're coming up with some pragmatic approaches.
Paano nga po ba yun? Lalo na ito, papalapit na yung barangay SK elections. Yun nga sabi niya, pag wala kang pera, hindi ka naman daw mananalo. Napapag-usapan niyo rin po ba yan? I mean, how do you deal with that? Paano ka babangga?
Yeah.
Babangga ka sa pader? Wala ka namang, kahit anong dala.
Yeah, that's a great question, Gretchen. Alam mo, ito yung mga challenges na hinaharap namin ngayon. As I've said, it might not happen. Yung mga changes na gusto nating mangyari kagad, it might not happen during our lifetime. But one way or the other, someone had to start this spark. And we're doing it. So, lagi ko na sinasabi, Rome was never great in one day. You not become great in one day. Somebody started it. So that's precisely what we're doing.
More to Gretchen's question, how do you specifically measure whether corruption has gone down because of your movement?
That's precisely one of our programs that we're now working on now. Come up with our key performance indicators and at the same time define our measures. Sabi nga nila, the only way we'll be able to control it is you should have to measure it. We'll be able to measure it. So yan ang isang workshop na gagawin namin this November 22, together with the other good governance mayors.
Parang may manifesto po kayo, tapos parang nakita ko rin po, nabasa ko may 10 points. Can you run us through those points in which the mayors that have joined this movement have all pledged to perform or to fulfill?
If you look at the good governance principles, there are about. Can I just highlight these principles? One is transparency, accountability. Another is efficiency, effectiveness, participative governance, inclusivity, rule of law, authentic leadership. So ito yung mga principles na sinusunod namin. But of course, we have to translate it into something doable, viable, and at the same time measurable. So November 24, we really have to work on it.
You said, Mayor, that there were still a few other mayors who were not willing to sign on because they're not willing to give up the perks and privileges of power. What exactly are you having them give up here?
Alam mo, we can only briefly describe it as acronym ng MAP. MAP means masarap ang pera. Alam mo, sometimes we have very idealistic political leaders when they start, assuming their positions, they have all this idealism. Pero pag natekman na nila yung mga special perks and privileges, especially the money that goes with it, meron ng porsyento nila, percentage sa mga projects, which is now up to 25%, up to 40%. Sabi nga ng isang former congressman dati 10% lang kami. umabot na ng 25 to 40%. Hindi pa sila nagsawa niyan. Sila na rin yung contractor, sila pa yung supplier. So makikita mo talaga na, sabi ko nga sa inyo, it's something pervasive, and are we not going to speak up? Tatahimik na lang tayo. And that's the reason why we formed this Mayors for Good Governance, para merong magsalita. Kailangan harapin na natin, head-on. Talagang kailangan i-resolve natin isolve natin itong problema na ito. Napakalaga, it's a clear and present danger. In fact, we consider it as a threat to national security.
So that's the bottom line. That's the money is what they don't want to give up, is what you're saying.
Yeah, yes. Sabi, there's a saying, proverbial saying that man's desire is insatiable. Pagdating na nito yung naabot na ninyo itong certain level na ito, gusto pa niya, sampasan ulit. Walang katapusan na greed.
Mayor, what's your movement specifically doing in terms of vote buying for these upcoming elections?
Well, it's a big challenge. We cannot admittedly, we cannot, address this at the moment. Kaya bago pa lang kami. So we're coming up with our own action plan, strategy. So we need to work closely also with certain agencies. Like for example, come November, meron kami meeting with ARTA, with Secretary Des Perez. Where we need also to work closely with the Philippine National Police, with the COMELEC. Ang dami rin naming mga kailangan na collaborative partnership na gagawin namin with the
meron din po ba
national
kayong
agencies.
meron din po ba kayong transparency campaign? Kasi ito nga, recently, si former USEC Shelo Magno, nilabas sa kanyang Twitter account yung confidential funds that was under the account of then Mayor Sara Duterte. Medyo malaki-laki yung pondo na yun. Your take on the use of these confidential funds, are these funds necessary for LGUs?
Okay, very good. Great question. Gretchen. I hope I'll be able to give you a great answer as well. Alam mo, I do not, sa akin, from a very personal opinion, I don't have anything against confidential fund as long as it's being used in accordance with the prescribed rules. For example, dapat sa akin, I have a confidential fund of about 2 million pesos. So I give it to the Philippine National Police purely for peace and order. Patapos the Peace and Order Council crafted a resolution and specifically prescribed the way the 2 million will be used or utilized by the Philippine National Police. So kailangan sinusunod niya. And I don't dictate on it. Sila lang gumagamit yan. All you have to do is liquidate it. Alam mo, may liquidation din yan. You have to cover it with certain proposals and receipts. Gano'n din ang nangyayari dyan. Hindi yung kung ano na lang gusto ng mayor, saka gagamitin. Kung baga, nasa discretion niyang paggamit yan. That should not be the way how we utilize our confidential fund.
Pero yun nga lang po, medyo malaki-laki yung pondo kung ikukumpara po side by side with social services. Kung masasabi niyo po doon.
Yeah, tama ka, Gretchen. Yung iba naman talaga na abuso talaga. Kumbaga, they look at a confidential fund as some sort of a discretionary fund na personal na, kumbaga parang personal discretion nila kung saan nila dadalhin. I think that's the wrong way of utilizing our confidential fund.
So 2.967 billion pesos is actually the confidential funds for Davao City from 2016 up until this year. I guess we're trying to just get a better sense because obviously we've heard the debates in Congress. I guess from you, we're trying to get a better sense of, okay, you're a mayor, you know how this works. Justified ba yon, amount na yon?
I really do not, I cannot really immediately comment on that, Regina. Sa ngayon, hindi ko kasi alam kung ano ba yung programa, ano ba yung proposal, ano ba yung mga prescribed na provisions on how they will utilize the fund. Baka meron silang certain situation doon na I do not know, we do not know. Every locality, every LGU have different types of situation, distinct situation. So hindi ko alam kung ano situation nila doon, kaya probably they have a situation that would justify that amount. I really do not know. For the meantime, I would rather refrain from coming up with
But at the moment, Mayor, you're confident with the Commission on Audit doing their job regarding the liquidation of these funds?
Will I say strongly agree or agree? Or neutrally agree? Ganun lang. Probably I'll just say agree, but not strongly agree.
Mayor, as civilians, as citizens, how can we help in making you, our officials, accountable and making the checks and balances alive?
Well, you just have to speak up. People should start speaking up. People should start, and they just can't simply remain silent about it. And that's the reason why we came up with this movement. It's a movement, it's not an organization. So that it will serve as a platform, as a forum wherein people can talk, can speak up, and come up with their complaints and raise hell about corruption in this country. Alam niyo, kung titingnan niyo lang yung confidential fund, napakaliit lang yan. Akala na ibang tao, yun na yung confidential fund, yun na yung mother of all corruption. Di pa. Meron pa nga dyan mga parking scheme na ginagawa na ipapark yung pera, 1 billion pesos, lalagay sa isang district, tapos iiwanan yung 5% o congressman o governor, mayor, sa'yo na yung 5%, pero ibalik mo yung 35%. If you're talking about 1 billion, you mean to say 50 million mapupunta sa bulsa ng politiko, ibabalik mo yung 35%, that's 350 million pesos. I remember a particular mayor who requested for 200 million, binigyan siya ng 1 billion, tuwan-tuwa siya, 1 billion for flood control project. Only to find out that after a few days, binalikan siya, siya nga pala mayor, may balik yan na 25%. That's 250 million. Kung gawain yan every year, 250 million, times 3 mo na lang during the 3 term. That's 750 million. Kaya may mga political leaders tayo na admittedly, sadly, siguro ang pera niya dyan sa loob ng bahay, mga billions of pesos. Tatahimik na lang ba tayo? Hindi na tayo magsasalita. Kung tatahimik tayo, parang complicit na rin tayo. Corruption is staring us in the face, but we're not doing something about it. Ano na lang ipapamana? What kind of legacy that we're going to pass on to the next generation? And at the same time, we're talking about the survival of this nation. Look at what's happening now. Tingnan mo din sa Southeast Asia, tatatlo na lang na countries ang nasa baba natin. Laos, Myanmar, and Cambodia. 2019, nalampasan na tayo ng Vietnam. Layo-layo natin dati sa Vietnam. Wala na tayo. Kaya kailangan talaga magsalita na tayo. Hindi na tayo pwedeng tumahimik.
Okay, and to that end, I hope you will continue talking to us. That was Baguio City Mayor Benjamin Magalong. Thanks for your time tonight, sir.
Thank you. Maraming salamat.
All right, now before we let you go, here is our big picture tonight. We are very proud of this. 2 of our One News anchors have been receiving their awards as Manila Overseas Press Club's Best Journalists. So you have on your screens the Chief Zuchi Cruz Valdez. She was awarded with a Lifetime Achievement Award by the MOPC for her remarkable journalism career spanning 37 years and counting. We also have Philippine Star's Editor-in-Chief, Amy Pamintuan, who also hosts the Chiefs. She was named Journalist of the Year. So congratulations to our kapatids for that amazing
ating mga Chiefs. Diba?
All right, well, that is the show for tonight.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Thanks for tuning in. Have a good night.